Friends, in the background of the information that Professor Payal Nagpal has given regarding the writing practice of Jean Genet, we have his main text, which is an iconic text. In fact, there is a kind of identification of the writer in terms of this play that she's going to discuss. And balcony, is not just the place in the house and overlooking something. Balcony actually is the writer looking around and also perhaps looking at us. And through that kind of a metaphor, we see the reality from a specific angle. So without further ado, I would request Professor Payal Nagpal to give us insights into this play, which is so very inspiring for the modern day audience.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Prakash. So we've been discussing the importance of role play in Jean Genet's work. And if we look at this particular image, we see how the actor is actually looking into the mirror. And this is from the balcony itself. So there's a revolution in terms of the play. There's a revolution that's going on outside, and there are people who are visiting this brothel. The play is located not outside in the world where the revolution is going on, but the play is located inside the brothel. And this brothel also has another name to it. It's called the House of Illusions. And it's called the House of Illusions because the idea is that people come and enact their fantasies of power. Somebody wants to become a bishop, somebody wants to become a general in the army, somebody wants to become a judge. Now, these are in society, these are positions of power, they enjoy a lot of prestige. But how is it that these roles are presented here? Now, if we actually look at a play like The Balcony, then of course, because it is located in the brothel, the whole sexual aspect of it is something that is taken for granted. The play actually rests on a discussion of the fantasies of power. So, as I said, somebody wanting to be the bishop or to pardon, somebody is performing, committed a crime, has committed a sin. So the bishop has the power to pardon. The general leads the army, and the ultimate act is of, giving up your life. Then there is the judge who wants to actually, pass a sentence of some sort and say that, this is a crime that you have committed and you're going to be punished. So these are the roles that are being performed in the brothel, and the brothel is run by Irma. And the brothel also becomes, in a sense, an indicator of the way in which the House of Illusions is an indicator of the way in which, in a sense, the society functions. And one thinks that Irma is in control, but actually, it is the chief of police who's actually running everything there in the House of Illusions. So, all this points towards the seamy side of society, towards another side of society, a side that is not available, a side that is more pronounced in Genet's plays than anything else. So he does not waste time on the niceties of it. He picks up his characters, he creates his plot in this seamy side itself, in a space that is outside. The brothel is outside the margins of the society. So that is exactly where his play is located. The women who are there. There are, of course, layers of exploitation. I won't go into that. But here, it is to be that powerful person, and these are ordinary people. Somebody is a gas man and so on. So these are very, very ordinary people who want to look at themselves as people who are powerful. And it is this, the show of power and how it corrupts and how people tend to believe what power is all about is what The Balcony is, really speaking all about. So the play, in that sense, if one is looking for, a linear plot, one is not going to get a linear plot. In fact, broadly, one can look at it in terms of how the first couple of scenes, how the first 4 scenes actually are based on, the role of the bishop, the role of the general, the judge, and then there is a beggar, right? And so he, in a sense, this is like giving us the entire social spectrum about how we have the image of power on one side and how we have somebody who's completely disempowered and who does not have anything. The only thing he probably has, he has lice, and that's what is foregrounded in that very, very short scene. So whereas the other scenes, to do with power are fairly long. So power in that sense is the most important fantasy of the ordinary people. So the bishop delights in forgiving people, the general looks for the grandeur of death, and the judge, of course, in punishing. So this aspect, we see, also in terms of the stage setting, how there are these three different screens and there are mirrors all around. And the idea is that one is always looking for an image that one wants to construct. And that image is one of power. One wants to see one reflected somewhere. Now, what is it that the chief of police wants here? He's very concerned that nobody wants to play his role. So he's asking them to build a mausoleum for him so that the moment somebody comes, then he can rest there in peace. The reason being that he feels that his position is not that powerful, that anybody would want to actually replicate that. So here, I would like to ask you what you think about this, portrayal of power, which I think because the locus remains the house of illusions and not normative society, it gives an entirely different meaning to the projection of power in society.
No, actually, when you were explaining, then I was thinking of the French scene. And French have always lived with the kind of revolutionary experience right from the late 18th century, when in 1789 they had the French Revolution. And after that, this process of people understanding the nature of the state, that became important because the state was different now. The king had already been shunted off, and the traders and the state that upheld their superiority, that came into being. But did that involve the common people? And here, as you rightly point out, it's a house of illusions. That so far as common people are concerned, they just don't have any touch with and any connection, any bonding with the forming of the state or functioning of the state outside. So they only dream about it. And that dream is well captured by the author, as you point out, and it will be a distorted picture of the society in which these characters live. But then they dream about it, they fantasize about it, and as you gave a very sharp example, the police officer doesn't want to live that kind of life because that is beneath the power of others. So there's a kind of power game being played outside the balcony. In society in general, in the society of the privileged people, but these people at least have the tendency to reflect upon what is happening outside. But the basic question that you are pointing towards, and that will take us further, is that these people will never be able to integrate with the power structure outside. So they have to live a hollow life.
Which is where, one has to ask the question of what, really speaking, in this play is the relationship between, let's say, the state and the house of illusions. So are they equivalent here? Is what is this game of power that is being shown in the house of illusions, is it equivalent, or is it the state versus the house of illusions? So these are questions, and there can be different opinions on this. What's very interesting in this play is, and it's very striking, is that there's a use of technology here, and this also is it reminds one of the panopticon, the apparatus that where everybody's visible in a sense to the person who's actually the guard, who's looking at everybody. Now here Irma, who's the madam of the House of Illusions, and she chooses to call it only the House of Illusions and not a brothel. She says because that's what gives her conviction in what she's doing. So she's got this apparatus through which she knows exactly what is happening in each of these studios, as she calls them, so that none of the women who are working for her in this House of Illusions revolts. However, there is a woman who revolts, and that's Chantal. And Chantal joins the revolutionaries. As mentioned, there's a revolution that's raging outside. So Chantal joins the revolutionaries, and here too, Genet also critiques this notion of how the revolution also demands a kind of image, and how the image can also be something that restricts people. So this use of the image might convince people, but just restricting everything to the image is very, very problematic. And this is where Genet, in a sense, takes us to the middle of this particular play, and we have the spectacle on the grand balcony, where there is an indication that the real bishop, judge, general, the queen, they are probably either hiding or are no longer alive, because there is something happening, there is unrest outside. But these people in the House of Illusions, they come to the grand balcony and they pretend to be the real bishop and the real general, the real judge, and Irma being the queen. Chantal appears and is shot, so almost indicating that all the rebellion has been quelled. Now, a play way ahead of its time, because of the way in which Irma has control over all the rooms through an apparatus, the way in which images, this circulation of images in society, and how it is the image that is, when they move through the city, they can actually identify people they know, but the people can't identify them, because now they are dressed in the robes that are associated with the role that they are playing, which means that Genet is asking the audience, the roles that you perform in society, are these your creation, or are these set roles that are given to you and you just believe what you are getting? So everybody believes that these are real people. This is, followed by a very, very interesting sequence where there is a scene with the photographers, and the photographers tell them how their image can be created, and hold this and you will look like the real bishop, and you will look like the real general and the judge, and so on. So this real aspect that is being emphasized through the photographers adheres to the real of the society. But what Genet is exposing here is that it is all a creation, that it is the photographers here who are creating these, and then these images are going to be circulated in society, and the people are going to unthinkingly accept them because they have been conditioned into accepting these roles. So this aspect of the construction of the image itself, Genet has often been understood through a kind of replication of the image. But I think what is more important than that is the way in which he actually unfolds how the image itself is a construction. So what
you are using the image very significantly.
Yes.
Image means that it's a kind of a construction of the character. He or she is creating an image. And that image then becomes the image of the society. So both ways, as a person who creates it, and as a stuff, that gets into it from the society outside. In fact, when you explain this, then one can wander back into the French history of the 18th century, when, for a long time, there was this kind of going up and going down, and the society was in a state of churning, and the question of the state emerged consistently in the 18th century itself. And then, this play also belongs to the future, as you suggest, because the play is written in 1957, and there is a kind of a student revolt in the 1960s. So which means that the state has always been in a point of turmoil, and that when the turmoil happens, then people's imagination is worked up, and then they start establishing a studio, as you rightly say. The people, where the artists such as photographers work, and they create a picture after their heart, but then it's a picture that can't shun the reality around.
So yes, but here the photographers are actually, they are conformists here, because they are creating they are trying to restore the entire equation of power by circulating the images of these common people, but they're projecting them as figures who belong to the real world. And so once these are circulated, there will be a sense that, now the unrest has been quelled. So here they are participating in restoring that the different powers that be.
Which means image is being used to establish an old pattern once again.
Yes, the image here is being used to establish an old pattern once again. So, but the question here is, what really speaking is real and what is the appearance here? So it is this technique that gives us, a new product in a sense at the end, which projects the role itself for analysis. Now, if we look at this, if we look at what the judge had to say, the judge says, my being judge is an emanation of your being a thief. You need only refuse, but you'd better not. Need only refuse to be who you are, what you are, for me to cease to be. So what Genet is saying is that if the people who are disempowered, if they reject these figures of power, then what is going to happen? So for instance, he says that the bishop, his act of pardoning is dependent on the prevalence of sin. And for the judge to remain judge, it is important that the crime is there. And so, the question I think that Genet is asking is about, can there be a world where this equation itself is done away with? And if it is done away with, then how is it possible? What kind of world will that be? Where, you no longer have crime, so you don't need the figure of authority to either pardon or to pass a sentence. So what really speaking, this brings us to the important point of what really speaking is the relationship between the state and the House of Illusions. So because ultimately Irma, who's shown to be in a position of power, is not the one who's ultimately managing it. It is the chief of police who's managing this space, and as he uses it to create the whole image of the real bishop, judge in general, the whole idea is to quell the rebellion. The last part of this play is very, very interesting because the group of rebels, who are being led by Roger, and Chantal, as mentioned earlier, had joined them. Now Roger, once Chantal has been killed, Roger comes to seek revenge, and he comes to seek revenge as the chief of police. And he wants to perform, the role that he wants to perform is that of the chief. Now, it's the first time that somebody has come to this House of Illusions to perform the role of the chief. And, he seeks, his wish is, the chief's wish is that his image should be replicated. But what Roger does is, he comes there and he destroys this image of the chief by castrating himself. And here, it is not the act, but it is at the level of the metaphorical nuance that the play becomes of great value, where the image of power, one image is used to do away with another image. This is where, where you have the photographers conforming to the image, but in the last part, we have one image that is used to do away with the image of power. And this is also reinforced by Irma, who says something very interesting and very, very Brechtian in that sense. She says, 38 studios, every one of them gilded, and all of them rigged with machinery. And all these performances, so I can remain alone, mistress and assistant mistress of this house and of myself. She then addresses the audience and she says, prepare yours, judges, generals, bishops. I'm going to prepare my costumes and studios for tomorrow. You must now go home where everything you can be quite sure will be falser than here. So which means that what Irma is saying is that she's calling this the House of Illusions. But here, the people come with their real, fantasy of being in that position of power. But the roles that they are performing in bourgeois life, she calls them falser than what is being enacted here. So here, it's interesting that the rebellion might have been quelled outside, but within the House of Illusions, the image of the chief of police has been done away with, and that image itself has been destroyed. So here, I think the balcony, really speaking, needs to be read and interpreted very, very carefully to see what exactly Genet is saying about the way in which roles are being, accorded to people in society. And this, I think, really reaches its epitome in a play titled The Blacks, a Clown Show. And I'll just speak very, very briefly about this one, that it's not just about the issue is not only about color. Now here, of course, he insists the play written, I repeat, by a white man is intended for a white audience. But if, which is unlikely, that it is ever performed before a black audience, then a white person should be invited every evening and the actors will play for him. So this is very, very significant. And the play, and it was interesting that Ghana had become independent exactly at the time when, 2 years, I think, after that, this play was written. So, which meant that this play was exploring the idea of, how people are oppressed on the basis of color. And that actually leads him right in the dedication to Abdallah when he asks that, what exactly is black? What exactly is color? So this play, of course, presents the polarities in terms of color, but it also does something very valuable, which, one might miss out easily, which is that the action is still taking place elsewhere. And I think by calling it a clown show, he had already given that indication in the title of the play itself. So this is where I think Genet's craft and expertise as playwright lies. And it's interesting that a lot of these plays are very, very sharp, and after this decade, I think he stops writing plays and he's more involved in, as Professor Prakash pointed out, the Students' Rebellion of 1968. He's active there, and then, of course, with the Black Panthers movement. So
I would like to raise a question, Professor Payal Nagpal, in this connection, that he seems to be a kind of continuous questioner. He goes into the questions and he threadbare discusses them. And you see, I was thinking also, as you were explaining his point of view and his presentation, thinking of Bertolt Brecht, who also wrote around the same time. Now, the kind of assertion of the common people that is shown in Brecht, which is at the center of the questioning that he does, I believe that when the two playwrights are put together, then one seems to be going in the direction of building up an alternative, and the other person wants to question more and more. So there is a kind of anarchist streak, which is quite important in any society in the 20th century, when even the left or the progressive states behave as states, not as democratic institutions. And who knows, Brecht is moving towards that democratic structure, and this person is raising a doubt about the democratic structure ever meeting the demands of the society of the time. So,
I would agree with your point of view. I would agree with this because if you look at Brecht is certainly taking us through a more meaningful route towards understanding the society, the problems therein, and to look for alternatives, and is suggesting them as well. The issue with Genet's plays is that his characters are so rooted outside the society that I think the strength of his plays lies in questioning. He goes probably, in that sense, goes deeper than even Brecht in terms of understanding and exposing the way in which power functions in society. I mean, just if you look at the balcony itself, I mean, so many different, how the roles of power itself, first of all, they are put up for discussion, the way in which images determine normative society. I think that, and of course, how towards the end, he uses one image to actually destroy the image of power, that of the chief. Now, the problem of being, anarchist remains here. That, is he questioning everything? Is he also questioning the solutions that there are? I think in the 50s and, post Second World War scenario, plus also, the final play, The Screens, is based on the French occupation of Algeria. So I think his plays are becoming not only more questioning, I would say they're becoming very sharp and revealing different realms. About answers, I would agree there that he's not providing us with any answers. I think for us to look for answers through Genet, one would have to actually look at his later writing, where he's writing very simply in terms of, articles about the Palestinian cause and so on.
Would you think that the kind of comedy, the kind of comic resolution, the kind of positive approach that people like Brecht, present, that is not there in this playwright, and his tone seems to be tragic.
It would be a slightly difficult comparison to make, because when we talk about the comic tone, one can also say that a lot of the characters that he presents are probably not there, detailed in such a way in Brechtian plays. So, as I said, that I would look at Genet more in terms of his strength. In fact, yes, there is a streak of practically nihilism, one can say. For instance, if I were to just read out, this is from his Reflections on Theatre, where he says, the actors and actresses must be induced to put aside cleverness, and they must be made to accept difficult endeavors and admirable gestures which have no relation to those they employ in their daily lives. If we maintain that life and stage are opposites, it is because we strongly suspect that the stage is a site closely akin to death, a place where all liberties are possible. So I would agree with you that here, yes, practically an anarchist and a very pessimistic, almost nihilistic sort of view that the only creativity that is possible, in the Strange Word Herb he says, the only creativity possible is in the cemetery. So it is a very problematic position to take. But the reason why I think a playwright like Jean Genet needs to be read and understood is for the strength of his questioning social roles.
I would say that his appeal is increasing in the 21st century.
Yes.
And things are becoming grim, things are becoming dark. And this is the kind of thing that worked in his own imagination. And that has come out as real. So it's a daunting scene that he presents. Just conclude with your comment on.
Yes, I would completely agree that Jean Genet's plays, especially, were way ahead of his times, because he was able to understand and also unfold, almost expose the way in which power functions in the society. And so I think the plays have tremendous value and should be read and maybe adapted to see what they have to offer to us today.
So friends, this is a fairly reasonable conclusion to the discussion of this playwright, and this takes us quite close to the experiences that the 21st century is facing today, is going through today, and that he continues to be, Jean Genet continues to be a figure in drama that will raise questions all the time and will not allow people to rest assured about things. One has to that way keep working intellectually to understand the new aspects of reality that keep coming up. So this is the conclusion, and I believe that this is something that is to be marked over. Thank you.